Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live with Genealogy and History for May 11th. I had to think of the date there for a second. Hope you're all having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Just get rid of all this stuff that's popping up all over my screen that stops me seeing or doing what it is I need to do with you guys. So we have some cool stuff on this day of May 11th in history. There is some awesome, there's even a genealogy piece in here too, which I'm kind of excited about because it mentions three different family lines, and all related to one particular event. So we're going to start off with 868. Yes, 868, and we are going through to 2015. We're going to go fast, and then I'm going to go back and add another link in because this very first item is really, really cool. Back in 868, the Diamond Sutra, the world's oldest surviving and dated printed book, is printed in Chinese and made into a scroll. There is actually a link to the British Library where you can read more about this book and how they determined the date. Because in the back of the book, they deciphered a piece that was written there that said, on the 15th day of the 4th month of the 9th year of the Xian Tong reign period, Wang Ji had this made for universal distribution on behalf of his two parents. And they were able, because of the date given, they were able to make the precise date in today's calendar as being the 11th of May, 868. And it told them who financed it, who it was done on behalf of, and the purpose of it. This is a 5-meter long horizontal scroll. The story behind it is incredible. So if you get a chance to I'm going to put the link into the description. It's not there right now, but I do have the link to put there. To think that, and then they went on to say the intricate frontispiece, which you can actually see a picture of, depicts the historical Buddha addressing his elderly disciple, Subhuti, surrounded by an assembly gathered under a grove of trees. The finesse in the details evidences the fact that printing had already grown into a mature technology by the 9th century in China. How cool is that? That is just absolute, that's just like mind-blowing to think that they had a printing technology available back then that figured out how to print things. Moving forward to 1068, Matilda of Flanders, the wife of William the Conqueror, is crowned Queen of England in Westminster Abbey, London. On the 11th of May, 1189, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I, Barbarossa, and 100,000 crusaders depart Regensburg for the Third Crusade. In 1502, Christopher Columbus, he comes around a lot, this guy, begins the fourth and last trip to the Indies. In 1751, Pennsylvania Hospital was founded by Dr. Thomas Bond and Benjamin Franklin. I happen to know a few families with the last name of Bond. I wonder if there's any connection to Dr. Thomas Bond, who helped found the Pennsylvania Hospital. Interesting to go back and find out. In 1752, the following year, the first U.S. fire insurance policy was issued in Philadelphia. In 1792, Columbia River was discovered up in the Northwest and named by U.S. Captain Robert Gray. This is pretty cool stuff, huh? In 1800, French naturalist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck gives a lecture first outlining his theories of evolution at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle in Paris, France. Now, we know that Charles Darwin had a lot to do with the evolution theory and all of that, so I wonder if his theories and Jean-Baptiste's line up. This one cracks up, but I happen to know that that from the historical things that I have read and everything else, that this was actually thought of as so in 1812 the waltz was introduced into English ballrooms. Some observers considered it disgusting and immoral, and if you look at all the dancing that was done in England prior to that, there were reels and lines and squares, and they stood in groups as they danced, and they danced up and down lines, and the only touching that you did was the touching of the hands. There was no hands on arms, body contact or anything like that. So yes, I can understand that when you're suddenly doing the waltz, you're a lot closer instead of the socially accepted distance apart for the dancing now. So I can understand why they see that. All right, now the same day, 11th of the same year, 11th May the 11th of 1812. This is a cool story because it's going to mention a couple of family lines in here. So on this day in 1812, British Prime Minister Spencer Percival is assassinated by John Bellingham in the lobby of the House of Commons in London. Ironically, descendants of both later stand for the same seat in Parliament at the same time, but neither win. Now, the British don't go for political assassinations. It's just not cricket. And if you know British terminology, you know the game of cricket, you'll understand that saying. And cricket is a game that they play. I love playing cricket. I love watching it too. Anyway, sidetrack. So Spencer Percival holds a unique place in British political history. He is the only Prime Minister ever to have been murdered while in office. It happened when, on this day, he entered the lobby of the House of Commons, where his assassin, John Bellingham, had been sitting quietly by a fireplace. As Percival entered, Bellingham got up, walked towards him, pulled a pistol out of his coat, and fired at the Prime Minister, fatally hitting him in the chest. "I'm murdered," Percival cried as he slumped to the floor, and he was right. Member of Parliament William Smith, who is the future grandfather of Florence Nightingale. Now, I don't know if anybody knows Florence Nightingale's story, but she is an incredible woman, and she's the one who brought sort of like a cleanliness and a wholesomeness to hospitals, where she would separate people in the hospitals based on what diseases they had, what injuries they had. She was known as the lady with the lamp because she would always walk through the wards at night with her little lamp checking on everybody. She's the one that made doctors first wash their hands when they were dealing with patients and things, instead of going from, and I know this sounds gross, going from one patient to another, touching every patient, but she made the doctors wash their hands in between each patient to help stop the spread of disease. Incredible woman. So Percival's just been shot. He's just died. The Member of Parliament, William Smith, who was the future grandfather of Florence Nightingale, see why I love this story, led a team that rushed to Percival's aid, but in vain. He managed only what Smith described as a convulsive sobs before a doctor confirmed that he was dead. By contrast, Bellingham, who had made no attempt to escape, was positively verbose. "I have been denied the redress of my grievances by government," he thundered, adding, "I have been ill-treated. They all know who I am and what I am. I am a most unfortunate man and feel sufficient justification for what I have done." And it turns out that what he had done, and he'd been falsely jailed for debts in Russia and could get no help from the British embassy. And after he was released, after serving 5 years in Russia, he launched a campaign demanding compensation from the British government, but they decided that he wasn't going to get anything. And so in his fits of sensing amounts of rage and everything else, he decided to kill the Prime Minister. Percival, who was the Prime Minister, was a married man with 12 children, was only 49 when he met his untimely and unlikely death. So Britain was robbed of a future great man. So was Britain robbed of a future great man? It seems not. A lawyer by profession, he was seen as a decent and honourable man who had risen in the Tory party to become Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1807 and Prime Minister in 1809. But the best a colleague could say about him was, he was not a ship of the line, but he carries many guns, is tight built, and is out in all weathers. When tried by the Old Bailey, Bellingham's plea for insanity was not accepted. He was found guilty of murder and sentenced to be hanged. So if you look at this story, you've got Percival there, who's got 12 children, which people can descend from. Then there's Bellingham. Then their descendants later on go for the same seat at the same time, and both of them fail to get it. Then you've got William Smith, who was the future grandfather of Florence Nightingale, who was an incredible person. She was one of the two that I used to do talks on in school when we had to talk about famous people. So there's just all of that. I mean, there's just that whole genealogy thing in there, and I'm sort of like, oh, I so want to get in there and find out what happened to the kids and everything else. So, yes, that's why it's got me all tortipated. In 1813, in Australia, William Lawson, Gregory Blaxland, and William Wentworth led an expedition westward from Sydney. Their route opens up inland Australia for the continued expansion throughout the 19th century. 1816, the American Bible Society was formed. In 1820, the launch of the HMS Beagle the ship that would later take a young Charles Darwin on his famous scientific voyage. So that's when that was launched. Let's see, what else we got in here? In 1904, Andrew Carnegie donates $1.5 million, that's US dollars, which equates to about $40 million after inflation, to build a peace palace. And the Peace Palace is the International Law Administrative Building in The Hague of the Netherlands. That it houses the International Court of Justice, which is the principal judiciary body of the United Nations, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, the Hague Academy of International Law, and the Peace Palace Library. It officially opened on the 28th of August, 1913. So there's a very interesting story behind all of that. And that was in 1904. So he donated 1.5 million US dollars, which equates to $40 million today. In 1907, the Bank of San Francisco was incorporated. In 1917, King George V grants royal letters patent to New Zealand, and the letters of patent constitute the office of the Governor-General of New Zealand, with royal instructions set out what the Governor-General's powers are, because the Governor-General in the Commonwealth countries is the representative of the reigning monarch. And so it basically tells them what they can and cannot do, and it's part of the uncodified New Zealand Constitution. They did change it later on where it became the only royal patent that is now a patent of letters, which is now signed by a prime minister, and that was in 1987, I think it was. In 1924, the Pulitzer Prize was awarded to Robert Frost for New Hampshire. I love his poetry. If you've ever read any of his poetry, it's really, really cool. In 1926, the airship Norg leaves Spitzenberg for the first air crossing of the Arctic Ocean, carried out the first verified trip of any kind to the North Pole. The flight on May 12th, 1926 is when they actually flew over the pole. He was also the first aircraft to fly over the polar cap between Europe and America. In 1927, Louis B. Mayer forms the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Let's see what else we got in here. There is a lot in here. In 1929, Dr. Ann Webb Blanton forms Delta Kappa Gamma Society in Austin, Texas. In 1949, by a vote of 37 to 12, Israel becomes the 59th member of the UN. On that same day and same year, Siam renames itself to Thailand. In 1956, Elvis Presley's first entry onto the UK had his first entry onto the UK charts with Heartbreak Hotel. In 1963, Puff the Magic Dragon by Peter, Paul and Mary hits number 2. 1965, Ellis Island is added to the Statue of Liberty National Monument. In 1967, the 100 millionth phone in the US was connected. 1967, there was 100 million phones connected. It's like, whoo! In 1969, British comedy troupe Monty Python forms, and it's made up of Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Terry Gilman, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, and Michael Palin. Incredible, incredible troupe to watch. They are just phenomenal. They've done some great, like the Holy Grail. They've done the Holy Grail, The Life of Brian, The Meaning of Life, and then they had the Monty Python TV series, which had a whole bunch of different really cool skits in there. And I love the Ministry of Unusual Walks, and I think it's either Norway or Sweden. They actually have a crossing where you can do your own version of the unusual walks across the crossing. Okay, back to this. In 1981, Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Cats, based on the poetry of T.S. Eliot, directed by Trevor Nunn, first premieres in West End, London. That musical has been around for so long. I remember one birthday when Dad was over here visiting that we took my mum and Dad to see it, and Brad got tickets on the day, and we went to Will Call to get the tickets. They were in the centre orchestra on the aisle, 4th row back from the stage, and he got them on the day. And so we're sitting there, and there's these cats prowling up and down the aisle next to us, and they're going across, 4 rows in front of us between the first row seats and the stage, and then they're climbing up onto the stage, and we were close enough we could see all of their facial expressions and everything. It was brilliant. In 2012, Chinese scientists break the world record by transferring photons over 97 kilometers using quantum teleportation. I thought, Wow, that's kind of really cool. And then in 2015, which is our final entry for today, the record price for a work of art at auction, Picasso's The Woman of Algiers, sells for, in the US, $179.3 million at Christie's in New York. I was like, who pays $180 million for a painting? Yikes. Yeah. so that is our run today from 868 to 2015. Were anybody that we mentioned today in your does anybody in your family tree appear in any of these events today? Are you related to any of the people that were mentioned today? If you need assistance with helping you find out more about your family tree, just go to helenconnects.com and you'll be able to set up a time there for a free consultation. That's it from us for today, for today's edition of Genealogy and History for May 11th. Tune in tomorrow for May 12th to see what happened on that day. So have a super fantastic working day.
13 hours.
Hei konera.